Good afternoon. Thank you for a response. Appreciate it. Welcome to the Author Tower. My name is Fred Term. I represent the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We are a volunteer organization whose mission is to promote writers and writing on the institution grounds, and we hope even beyond, by those supporting and supplementing the activities of the institution's Chautauqua Writers Center. We sponsor several events every week. On Sundays at 5 o'clock in the Crow's Room, which is on the second floor of this building, we have an open mic for writers and listeners 18 years old and above. And it looks like everyone meets that qualification, so you're invited to participate. This Sunday is the last open mic of the season. We don't do one on the 24th. On Fridays at 1:15 in the guard room on the first floor of this building, we offer, an informal critique session. Writers are invited to bring in 10 copies of one single-spaced page of their prose or poetry for feedback, guided by John Brantingham, a professional writer who has taught courses at the Writers Center. You have to pay for those courses. This is for free. So think about attending. And today, as part of the Tuesday Authors Hour reading series, two Chautauquan writers will present their work. At halftime, I will tell you about some of our special events. That's right after our first reader reads. Books will be for sale after the readings. Laura's our first reader. Birds are here, and Susan Nusbaum are in the Octagon, which is a short walk away, so that should not prevent impulse buying. Let's do that. And both authors will be very willing to sign books. Our first reader, Lara Lillibridge, is the author of The Truth About Unringing Phones, essays on Yearning, Mama, Mama, Only Mama, and a reverent guide for the newly single parent, and Girlish, Growing Up in a Lesbian Home. Lara is the interviews editor for Hippocampus Magazine and creative nonfiction co-editor for Heartwood Literary Magazine. She holds an MFA in creative nonfiction from West Virginia Wesleyan College. She's from Lakewood, Ohio, not the one down the road, and has a cabin in the Woodsville. Lara Lillibridge.
Start my timer so I remain well behaved. Goes against my nature. So I'm going to be reading from The Truth About Unringing Phones, which is my most recent essay collection. Excuse me. When I was 4 years old, my father moved from Rochester, New York to Anchorage, Alaska, a distance of over 4,000 miles. I spent my childhood chasing him, flying a quarter of the way around the world to tug at the hem of his jacket, beg him to look at me. As I aged, my adoration of my father and longing for him was layered over with anger, revulsion, and later pity like a hand-dipped candle. These new emotions fusing with, but not replacing the yearning, which remained at my core. My father is in his 80s. Dementia comes and goes and stays longer each time. My father is a lonely old man, and society says I should be a dutiful daughter. But the only way I survived my father was to cut myself off from him, having only the most superficial of interactions. This book is my attempt to weigh responsibility versus self-preservation. Next, I'm going to read from the essay called The Truth About Unringing Phones. My father didn't know I walked away from him. I just stopped answering the phone, stopped scheduling visits, stopped pretending. It took him years to notice I was gone. Now he is the one who sits beside an unringing phone. He's no longer daddy, just a father I used to know. His head is filled with memories crumbling to shards, flashes of images put together with the wrong names attached. I struggle not to call. Calling only opens the wound that is scabbed, not yet scarred. I don't call, and I pretend I don't want to. He calls, and I don't answer. His time remaining is short. This is the last chance for what I never had. But I already know I will never get more than I have now. The only surprise is that I suddenly care again, years after walling off my heart. Somehow, an image as he is now has gotten stuck inside my head. The smell of his adult diapers, the scrape of kissing his sharp, scruffy cheek, the empty eyes of a man who was once the smartest person I knew. Perhaps this will be the winter of the final phone call, telling me he no longer waits by the phone for anyone. How do you say goodbye to a father you've already abandoned? Tucked in my closet is his old plaid coat, which I neither wear nor throw away. It no longer smells like his warm neck, but the scratch on my cheek is the same. I try not to think about the way Dad's hands looked as they grasped the smooth wood tiller as he taught me to sail, his fingers red and the back of his hands ropey with the same veins as my own. The lilt in his voice as he taught me this one beloved thing. I haven't sailed in years. The last time I was on a boat, I refused to take a turn at the helm. What was the point? Instead, I tried to remember the postcards Dad sent when he took other people's children on vacation, and I sat home alone. I recall the stuffy stillness of a house with an unringing phone on my birthday, when I passed my road test, when my heart was broken or my dog died, or the time I won the 100-yard dash. So many silences. But he always remembered the names of my friends, though he'd never met them. The problem is that the space I made when I walked away is filled with the echoes of his voice calling for me now that he is alone. The other children he chose over me don't want him either, not that they ever did. It was always their mothers who forced them on each other. My father had a succession of 7 different wives, so there was lots of stepchildren. And as for me, I was never enough for him to choose, no matter who was smarter, prettier, did better in school. Perhaps my inescapable failure birthed my apathy. I was never very good at having goals beyond having a family of my own. I gave up trying to win at anything back in 9th grade, and it wasn't until I became a mother that I allowed myself to dream again. But Facebook showed him smiling with other people's children, even while my own sister wasn't invited to Thanksgiving, even though her son had just died 3 months before. I flew across the country for the funeral, and my father spent the morning at his step-granddaughter's 3rd birthday and was late to the memorial service. Life is for the living, he said. Weren't my sister and I still alive? He meant to be there earlier, but it was not his fault it started to rain. I picture myself made of bronze, my cheek cold, my ears sealed shut. I wish and hope to be that taciturn and strong, but I am made of flesh and my heart still yearns for him, though I tell myself over and over not to give in. And I still know I will mail gifts again this year, and I will have to answer the phone at Christmas and New Year's and his birthday. And I know his faded voice will yearn for me, and still I will make excuses and hang up as soon as 8 minutes are done. This essay is called The Reno Air Race. The one thing my mother always said about my father was that he was a good doctor. No matter what, she never doubted his brains or his medical ability. Sometimes it was the only good thing she could think of to say about him. My stepmother Tricia's first husband died flying to the Oshkosh Air Show from Alaska. The story, as my father told it, and it may very well be wrong, was that her husband, who was a lawyer and a private pilot, knew that his propeller was cracked, but he thought it would make the trip. The propeller fell off mid-air, but that wasn't the problem, actually. He successfully landed on a highway, got out of the plane, and was hit by a truck.
Oh, what?
The accident occurred while Tricia was flying commercial down to meet him from Alaska, and the airline called her over the PA at her connecting flight airport. No one knew what to do with her, so they took her to the hospital and kept her there overnight. I still shudder when I hear someone called to a courtesy phone, she told me. In 2006, when he was 70, my father was told he had Alzheimer's, that he was experiencing the beginning of dementia. My father flew from Alaska to my house in Ohio, and my brother flew up from North Carolina to spend a week together while Dad was still the person we remembered. We took my baby to the play area at the mall and got a family portrait taken. We shoved our adult bodies into the tiny train and went around the oval together. I don't remember what else, really. It was a quiet, uneventful trip, and I was waking every 2 hours, the baby, so a lot of that year is clouded over in my mind. It was pleasant. Oh, I lost my place. My husband was at work, Dad's wife was in Alaska, and my brother's wife was in Asheville. It was only the three of us for the first time since their last trip on his boat, the Ghost, when I was 12 or 13. Bad memories get seared into the synapses of our brains, but good memories are harder to hold on to, for me anyway. This is one I wish I could reclaim, hold it against my cheek as I fall asleep. Dad retired from medicine when he started to have memory problems, but in the next 5 years, he came to doubt the assessment. He was tested periodically, and sometimes he scored higher than others. He told me on the phone he'd just been tired of the initial diagnosis, not forgetful. He tried to have his medical credentials reinstated, but the hospital refused, so he became a school nurse. He ranted for years about the hospital administrator's incompetence in not letting him practice medicine. After losing the car keys in the store a few too many times, Tricia stopped letting Dad go to the store alone anymore. She told me there was no way he could fly anywhere without supervision, even on a direct flight. But they both kept insisting he aced the memory test the doctors gave. It was only a little senility, nothing to worry about. On another visit to Ohio, Dad pulled me aside and told me if he really had dementia, he was going to kill himself. He'd seen what dementia did to families, and he wasn't going to put us through that. He had pills, he told me, and right before it got bad, he'd take them. He wanted my permission, which I gave. I believed in death with dignity. When I first met your father and he said he was a pilot, my stepmother said, I thought, oh no, here we go again. I don't know how they wound up the Reno air races. It was Dad's idea or her own. I don't know if I could have done it. But Tricia wasn't daunted by flying, even in Dad's little two-seater plane. Going to an air show was just another adventure for her. I can picture my father researching the Reno air races, reading articles in the aviation magazines. The anticipation was always one of the best parts of the experience for him. We're going to break a record today, Jimmy Leeward said to the video crew as he walked on the tarmac at Reno for the 2011 Unlimited Class Championship race. His modified 1944 P-51 Mustang fighter was called the Galloping Ghost. Leeward had done all he could to reduce drag, including shortening the wings, and if he could exceed 500 miles per hour, he'd set a new record. My father and Tricia paid extra for grandstand seats at the grand finale. Dad loved everything to do with World War II and aviation, so getting to sit right at the finish line was the culmination of a long-held dream. While Dad and Tricia watched, along with thousands of others, Leeward's plane spun out of control, diving into the spectators to the left of the grandstand. He hit the ramp at 400 miles per hour, dying on impact. Debris blew through the crowd, knocking people over, killing 10, injuring 69 others. It was the first air show crash that killed bystanders. Tricia jumped over the barricade at the edge of the runway, yelling, "I'm a nurse," in defiance of the officials' orders to stay put. A man was lying on the tarmac with a severed artery, and using her hands and whatever she could find nearby, she stemmed the spurting blood and saved his life. The airport personnel commandeered a helicopter that was on display and used it to life flight victims to a nearby hospital. After the medics left and the crowd thinned, she couldn't find Dad. While she had jumped to action, he had meekly followed the crowd into a hangar. She found him with all the other bystanders. penned up neatly out of the way of emergency technicians and out of view of the carnage. They told us all to follow them, so I did, he said. But you're a doctor, Tricia said. And that was when I knew it was bad. An author interview during COVID time. I was conducting an author interview for a literary magazine in the first few weeks of lockdown. The writer and I were from the same hometown, and she mentioned that she lived near Highlands Hospital, where I was born. My father used to work at Genesee Hospital, I told her without thinking. Mine too. What was his specialty? Oh, fudge. Gastroenterology, I answered cautiously. Mine too. Does he have the same last name as you? Maybe my father knows him. The clench of my stomach in response to her question was familiar. I felt it every time I went to a new doctor and they read my name on the chart. Are you Flint Lillibridge's daughter? That feeling should have been pride. It should have granted me inclusion in the secret club of doctors' families, those who knew the back corridors to the hospital and what food to avoid in the doctor's side of the cafeteria. My father was brilliant, a double specialist, and his name unusual enough to be remembered. But I didn't raise my chin and smile to acknowledge my lineage. Instead, I hang my head, lightly trace circles with my fingertips on the white table covering I sat on, slowly waving my dangling feet as they hung off the exam table. Yes, he's my father. What did they know that I didn't? I watched my face as I answered the writer's question, unable to stop my mouth from making a polite question unbearably awkward. Oh, I'm sure your dad does know him. He got kicked out for some sort of sex scandal. I don't know what exactly, but I think it's because he had an affair with the patient's mother and she tried to kill herself and ended up in the psych ward of Genesee Hospital. My head was screaming at my mouth, stop talking. When I finally shut off my voice, but I couldn't take my words back. The woman said something like, oh, and changed the subject. And this is not the ending, but one of the later chapters called Closure, the last one I'll read. 6 months after Unsolicited Press accepted this manuscript for publication, and 2 years after the first COVID lockdown, I bought a ticket to Seattle to see my father. I didn't want to, but I knew it was time. Before I knew it, the weeks turned into days, turned into hours, and then it was time to go. Panic left at the edge of my rib cage. Dad was back on hospice orders, meaning not that he was sick, but that the end was anticipated to be near. He'd only receive comfort care. If he got sick, there would be no antibiotics. If his heart stopped, no resuscitation. As dramatic as that sounds, he was not yet in crisis. The end was coming, but not necessarily soon. It could be months or years. But I wasn't going to rush to his bedside again and again. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I was sure I'd find it when I saw him again. This was my goodbye journey. Wow. Let's skip ahead for time here. My sister and I woke at 5 a.m. and made the 3-hour drive to his facility. We were early, of course. Years of our father's chronic lateness meant we were both adults who were compulsively early for everything. We had time to kill, so we went to Rite Aid, Home Goods, and Target. Julie and I fingered Easter decorations and flipped through hangers on racks. We chatted about decorating, dating, and childhood. Do you remember Dad's rubber female suit, she asked. I'd never seen it, but I had heard of it. Dad used to make me babysit you and Matt along with his girlfriend's kids while they were busy in the bedroom and he was still married to Margaret, she said. I vaguely remember playing with the girlfriend's kids and we thought Dad was going to marry her because he brought her Daisy. He was so mad at my telling the kids that. Oh, look at this rabbit. I'd buy it if I had grandkids, my sister said. Finally, it was time to go. We pulled up in front of this facility and waited for our stepsister, Tammy, to arrive. She visited every week, so she arranged her schedule so she could introduce us to the staff. She was a few minutes late, and we were a few minutes early. I was in no rush to go inside. My body was heavy with dread, my stomach acid rising in my throat. Finally, Tammy pulled up in a dark blue Subaru. She led us inside where our temperatures were taken and recorded in a logbook. Tammy and Julie removed their masks, but I kept mine. I didn't want to be responsible for bringing COVID into their facility. Dad was asleep in a reclining sofa. The aides woke him gently, moving him to a still reclining but more upright position. Julie leaned on the puffy arm of the couch, her unmasked face close to Dad. "Hi, Dad," she said with a big smile and a cheerful face. "Julie," he said, and cried small, soft sobs, but the edges of his eyes held only a trace of wetness. "Dad, it's Lara," I said. Nothing. I tried again, pulling my mask down so he could see my face. He looked at me, then back to Julie, crying again. "Hi, Tammy," he said to me. "It's Lara," Julie said, and Dad just kept crying. It seemed as if his tears were frustration with his memory or his words. My father looked at the African-American aide and said, "Hi, Matt," which is my brother's name. My brother's Caucasian and 6'9". The aide was shorter than I am. "It's Lara," I said, pulling my mask down, though I didn't come here expecting him to know me. I figured if he remembered me at all, it would be a younger version, very different from my nearly 50-year-old body. "Lara, bad memories," he said, crying again. Julie said, "We don't have to talk about that." I interrupted my sister. "I want to hear it. Let him speak." I didn't care what he said about me, but I wanted to hear his words. "Genesee Hospital," he said, followed by a few soft sobs. Julie interrupted. "Let's talk about happy memories. Do you remember your dog in medical school? What was his name?" "PK," my dad said softly. "That's right, PK, and you took him all over the University of Washington campus." We talked dogs for a while, dogs from my childhood and dogs from his. But to say it was a conversation would be an overstatement. We asked questions we knew the answers to, and he affirmed them. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" I asked. "Genesee Hospital," he answered. "Let's talk happy memories," my sister said again. I pulled her aside and I said, "Julie, I have wanted to know this story my whole life. This is my last chance." "Margaret," his fourth wife, "told me he had sex with an underage patient," she whispered. "I don't care what it was. I want to hear it in his own words." "Genesee Hospital?" I prompted. "Confrontation. I have it under control," he said. "You have it under control?" "Yes." He cried again, his shoulders shaking. I held up a photo that he had taken of me at 6 years old. "It's me, Lara." He didn't respond. "Genesee Hospital," he said and cried. "I have it under control." "I'm glad you have it under control," my sister said. "I'm naked in front of my wicked daughter," my father replied. "Then that's a joke." "I know it's a joke," my sister said, "and you have all your clothes on." I'm going to skip ahead to the end. When he was occupied, I stepped outside to summarize everything to my stepsister. He was kicked out of Genesee Hospital in some sort of sex scandal. I don't know what really happened, but once he said his partner brought him off on child pornography charges. "That's what we found when we moved him in here," Tammy said. "Lives of little girls, their legs up in stirrups. Maybe they were for teaching, but why did he keep them for so long? Of course, he had porn in that box and sex toys and blow-up dolls. We threw it all out." I wasn't worried about sex toys. There's nothing wrong with adults having creative sex play, but I had been nervous about his slide collection. I didn't want to know what pictures he developed in his own darkroom, and if any were of me. I might have stopped there.
Just a few announcements about our special annual event. Now, at this time of the year, they're all in the rearview mirror, but we hope and plan that they're coming up again next year, so I will mention them so you can start thinking about them. We hold a book fair every summer for authors among us, Chautauquan authors, usually mid-July. This year was July 13th. If you published a book and would like to be part of the book fair, please go to our webpage, bhq.org/FCWC, and you can find a link to an application. I will repeat that webpage a couple more times in the announcement. Our annual writing contest closed the end of July 27th, and we have the awards ceremony just a couple of days ago on August 10th. We have contests for all ages of writers, so keep that in mind next year. Once again, you can find out more information at our webpage, chq.org/FCWC. Back on August 4th, we had the Robert Pinsky Favorite Poem Project that Robert Pinsky himself initiated under the sort of patronage of Georgia Court. So that was August 10th. Once again, next year we will run that. So if you have a favorite poem that you'd like to share with Chautauquan, please, you can check the webpage. Anybody have it memorized? bhq.org/FCWC. With lots of these activities, the awards ceremony, Author Power from the past, the Robert Pinsky Favorite Poem Project. If you go to YouTube and you search for the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center channel, all those things since 2020, when we all went virtual, are recorded there. Do want to remind you there'll be books for sale here for Laura, over in the Octagon for Susan, and they'll be available for signing those books. And Susan Dworski Nusbaum is our second reader. This Uncertain Voyage came out in 2024 and is her fourth poetry collection. She has a fifth coming out soon. 2026, next year then. Her books, What We Take With Us, Open Wide the Eye, and Alive in This Place were released by Coffeetown Press in 2014, 2016, and 2019. I believe it's Finishing Line Press that'll be releasing their next collection, and the title is Sign Language. Born in Rochester, New York, she received a BA from Smith College and a law degree from the University of Buffalo Law School. She lives in Buffalo, New York, where she raised her family and worked as a musician, teacher, arts administrator, and most recently as an attorney. Her work has appeared in numerous publications, including the Connecticut River Review, Poetry East, Woven Tail Press, Nimrod International Journal, Chautauqua Literary Journal, Calliope, Chautauqua Harbor Palette, Wisconsin Review. Can't do this all on one breath. This out there, a celebration of Western New York poet and the Buffalo News. She has presented her poems in solo public readings in several communities in the Northeast and Florida. And now she graces our porch, Susan Dworski.
Everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Put it down. Okay. I did the wrong thing.
Maybe.
There. Is that better? Great. Thank you all for being here, and thanks so much to Lara. It was just so beautiful and heartbreaking. Yeah. Kudos. And I'm especially thankful to the Writers Center of Chautauqua for giving me the opportunity of learning about poetry, giving me the tools, learning the craft of poetry, and I appreciate it very much. My 4 published collections. Here we go. Like that. Are going to be at the Octagon, as Fred said. But I do have this new manuscript, and I'm going to read quite a few from that manuscript. Not available, and it won't be available actually for pre-order in April, and then for the actual publication in August. So I look forward to that coming out, but I'm going to read quite a few of them today because I just like reading. And the first one has to do with the California fires that occurred last January. And it's based on a photograph that I have of a friend's grandson. And I have it here. I don't know if you can see it, but if you want to pass it around, it's a very sad-faced little 15-year-old who's standing on the remains of his former house. And he's holding something, and that's what it's about. By the way, the name of it is Sign Language. And in this manuscript, you'll find stories of ordinary encounters, the mysteries of the natural world, memories of individuals, tragedies, romance, and joy. Sometimes signs are encountered on billboards and posters, billboards on the side of the road. And in my book, I have a small collection of 3 of them, and they're really based on what's on the sign or imagined stories that are related to them. I am going to read one of them. But more importantly, we learn from the whispered messages that are inside everything we do, in the minutia of our daily lives. And that gives us the ability to change, renewed energy, hope, hopefully laughter. They remind us to pay attention to the language inside the heart of things. The first one, what remains? In the photograph, a blurred landscape, endless soot and rubble, devastation ignited by relentless Santa Ana winds howling across the hills, and a careless ember caught on a marigold leaf, leaping to fields of artemisia, pinyon pine forest, orange tongues twisting across Topanga Canyon, devouring the Palisades town square, carefully tended gardens of family homes, to patios, tool sheds, and cabanas, house fires stoked with desks and cribs and books, mantles and armchairs, dollhouses and laptops, smoke trellising into a blackened sky. Nothing to hold for this teenage boy with the sad face as he picks through the silent bones of his childhood, amazed to unearth from the litter a single shard of gleaming gold, finger loop of a porcelain handle attached to a Limoges cup, whole and unscarred, gift to his mother from his mother's mother. Cradling the teacup in his hands, he offers it to the camera, blows away a veil of ash. The next one is entitled Ashes. After my mother's funeral, my sister and I were left to dispose of her possessions, carefully listing each item in a notebook. Silver salad bowl for company Thanksgiving gravy boat, Pfannkuchen pan, scoured to brilliance, antique mirror in the front hall where she brushed our hair before school. Piles of kitchen utensils, plates and pots littered her kitchen floor, books packed for the library, photographs in boxes to sort another time. When we stopped to rest a while, we found our two daughters weeping in the den, unable to imagine this house without their Nana. We hadn't foreseen that our children might feel this loss as we did, would react with such sorrow to the missing presence of their grandmother, while we, her daughters, buried our own grief in the mechanics of dispersal, a scattering of ashes, as if these objects were all that were left. Outside my 7th floor window, I can see every day a tree, a golden locust, and very often I will go down and stand under it. So this is about the golden locust. If you stand under its branches and look up into the autumn foliage, you might think you're staring at an August night sky by the lake. So surrounded are you by luminosity, gazing not from a distance, but centered inside a room of mirrors, finding your reflection flickering around you, 1,000 oval flames against the blue. Today, no sound stirs the late October air. No sparrows spill their chatter within this space. Only a quiet breeze breathing the golden leaves into motion, and the faint buzz of the cosmos, offering one last rapturous moment to hold you through the long winter until spring begins its leafing out. And soon, amazed, you'll find yourself back inside the heart of things. There's another poem in this manuscript about the golden locust. It's important to me. I want to hold your hand. It's not unusual to see couples strolling down Lafayette Avenue, swinging their joined hands as they chat and laugh into the delicious spring air, still clinging as they pause to admire red tulips, purple irises on front lawns, past vast front porches, waving greetings to neighbors with their free outside hands to avoid letting go. What joy, I recall as I drive by, to have a warm hand in mine to help me keep my balance as I walk, to share the surprises of a new season, and along the way connect with near strangers who would smile and see me coupled, so secure in the arc of the swing, someone's fingers braided through my own, someone who wants to walk with me along whatever path we decide to follow. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever heard of whippoorwill. Anyway, it was a new experience for me. Whippoorwill. Those soft Florida days, a breeze brushes my cheek. Herons call across the bay. Ripples reflect a cloudless sky. But when night comes, a squawk pierces my sleep. Not a song, not a whistle. Deafening, incessant, 3 syllables repeated like some maniacal robot or a mechanical ceiling fan malfunction. Google informs me it's a whippoorwill, a small nocturnal bird with a wingspan broad as an owl. the cacophony territorial, designed to attract a mate. I lie awake seething with annoyance, hoping he'll soon find the perfect match, with help perhaps from an avian e-harmony. Sleepless and mateless, I begin to find his search strangely comforting, recognizing that this creature, pre-programmed eons ago, is doing his life's work, running on automatic, as he must. And I'll adjust as I must. This is a Chautauqua poem. I don't know how many of you have experienced this real sense of calm as you drive from wherever you live to Chautauqua. But anyway, maybe you can relate to this. It's called Portage Road. From the rise on Route 394, you can see everything. Intersections and potholes, S-curves, deer crossings, hawks circling overhead, the road bounded by dark forests fringed with milkweed, and the calm of two waters. Lake Erie, hazy in the rear view, easing you toward the shimmer of Lake Chautauqua on the horizon. Push ahead like the Senecas before you, who dragged their canoes onto dry land, lifting them through footpaths and fertile fields over the miles between one lake and the other. And French explorers heaving their birch-bark vessels through dense woodlands on their trek to discover the mouth of the Susquehanna and beyond to the Mississippi. Emboldened by the hum of tarmac beneath your wheels, feel the irresistible nudge of history, waves spilling over ragged shorelines, urging you forward across this narrow but seductive passage between two lakes. And the last one I'm going to read from this book is one of the three billboards that I have written about. Well, I've written about four, but one of them is in a different book. But this one is called Free Hugs. Oh, yeah. Judy was there when we all experienced this together. Judy and her late husband, Len. Free Hugs. The day after the election, 2024, my friends and I commiserated at the pancake house in the village, weeping into our maple syrup, inconsolable as we reviewed the terrifying outcome of the presidential race, which we feared would cast our country into tyrannical coalition with Hungary and Russia. Ashamed by our failure to predict this loss, we cataloged the president-elect's past offenses, his ignorance and lies, his hate-mongering assertions, his frightening plans for the first day of his new term. As we glanced out the window, we witnessed a large gathering forming on the sidewalk. Villagers, old and young, men and women, waving posters announcing free hugs, and a growing crowd of takers, hungry for the solace of community, grateful for the existence of kindness in the world, for the comfort of ordinary human contact. In a burst of optimism, we embraced the resilience of these strangers, resolved to pursue our dreams of a bright future for this democracy under a cloudless November sky. I'm going to just read a few from two of my published books. The first one is from This Uncertain Voyage, which was published in 2024. And I hope I can get through this. The first one I'm going to read, I don't think I've read here before, but it was the focus of a emailed website called Poetry Town. And the person who does the website is George Bilger, who's just a fabulous poet, and apparently liked this a lot. So he communicated it. The substitute. As she walks on stage, we rise in appreciation. Diminutive, plain-faced, sturdy, called in at the last minute to step in for the famous pianist, suddenly ill. Rachmaninoff's second, so difficult, so dangerously sentimental. We attend out of curiosity, sit nervously at the edge of our seats, uplifted by the first chords, stunning crescendo, promise of rapture to come. She's strangely familiar, this replacement, the understudy facing her big chance. Who hasn't watched from the wings or prayed to be chosen from a list of candidates? Who hasn't wept anonymous by the hearth, longing for an invitation to the ball? At the end of the performance, the audience leaps up again, screaming bravos for her fairy tale success. The auspicious convergence of skill and luck. Before playing the encore, she confesses to the audience, "Just hours ago, I thought I'd be sitting at home tonight eating Chinese takeout." This one is dedicated to my late husband, Ron Van Varden, whom many of you knew. Bending. From my Adirondack chair, I watch tall grasses dance at the wood's edge. Honey locusts bow in the wind unbroken. Colorful arcs trace the paths of finches and jays as they soar from feeder to nest. And nodding on their supple stems, daylilies turn their faces into the sun. You, my new husband, appear at the screen door of our cottage, holding it open with your elbow, fingers curled around the handles of 2 warm mugs. You bend to kiss me. How miraculous that we have changed course intact, leaning into each other as we grow toward the morning light, bending to stay alive. The last one I'll read from this book is called The Elephant Speaks of Love. It's from a newspaper headline. Scientists confirm elephant in South Korea can reproduce speech. Why are we surprised to read that another mammal feels the anguish of isolation so deeply he learns to reproduce his trainer's speech? That Koshik, the circus performer, has taught himself the elaborate technique of placing the tip of his trunk into his mouth to imitate the frequencies of Korean words. Sounds his trainer, his only companion, made. Separated from his own kind, he scarcely remembers their comforting snorts and bellows, slurps and growls. What creature wouldn't find a way to greet his only friend? Koshik knows the power of words to bring reward, nourishment, whispered endearment, the attentions of a trainer who gazes like a grateful lover into the animal's watery eye, leans his cheek against his rough haunches, and caresses his articulate trunk. spent with language. Um, 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Okay, I was going to read from this book, but I'm not going to do that. But I do have another one because I realized this morning that I had that there is a Gershwin performance this afternoon at the Women's Club, and it's in memory of Robin Radin, who was a wonderful partner of Georgia Court, and he himself was a great supporter of the literary arts here, and especially music, and of course tennis. So I just wanted to, I remembered that I had written a poem in my first book, and it was 2016, about Gershwin, and I think you'll recognize some of the lyrics that are in this poem, if you know Gershwin song. Somebody loves me. Some nights after supper, early supper, my mother opened the Gershwin song, pulled me close on the piano bench, arms and hips touching. Old enough to read, but too young for long division, which kept my sister upstairs at the maple desk. I sang through the book front to back, belting out The Man I Loved and Embraceable You. Mother at the keyboard, proud as punch, cherry red fingernails clicking. My sister shouted at us to stop the racket, but we were unstoppable. The pinafore girl and her aproned mother, suddenly spotless, the two of us at the Milton Grand, green wall to wall underfoot, lilac shivering with delight on the magnifiers. That's where I learned to dream far beyond the next school day. My paradise, reached someday by stairway, each step a little closer to the one and only who yearned for my embrace. That's where I learned to wish for someone beside my parents to watch over me. Someone else I could be good to. And although my mother told me it was naughty, to implore a mysterious man to do it again, even when I cried, no, 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 no. It was very clear that old man trouble wouldn't find me in that sturdy house, and my good news day would arrive as promised, as soon as the man I loved came along. Who could ask for anything more? My heart had yet to be broken. What did I know of the blues?
Very well observed and well described poem, curious, and then every once in a while, unexpected. Thank you so much. We're going to take just a few minutes for any questions you have. So, if you have a question, please raise your hand. I will ask one. Both of you deal in some of your pieces, at least, with very painful experiences. Does the writing help you deal with those experiences, or does it open old wounds? Maybe you could come up here so you can be on camera when you answer.
Thanks. I would say both. When I'm writing the first draft, it definitely reopens old wounds. You really have to put yourself back in that space to really remember it fully. But every time I revise it, it gets further away. And I find that my memories get less sharp over time. And then now they live between the covers of the book, and I don't have to carry them anymore.
My answer would be somewhat the same because it does help me clarify my memories of bad things and get them down on paper, and that does help, I think. A therapist would be able to know that more than I. But the other reason for writing about these things is that I really write poetry to communicate with other people, and I think that a lot of the emotions, even the experiences that one person has, really can help another person to deal with those things. So it's a two-way street. Yeah.
Yes, with the hand raised back there, that lovely lady. Well, that's my wife. Yes, go. Okay, so the question is whether there are two or three maybe specific skills or experiences you had at the Writers Center, probably with Rick Kelly, who's back there. Okay. Okay, or some other lesser poet. Okay.
Rick was one of my first influences, and I was unwilling at that point to share any of my work. I had two husbands who died, and they were, I just wrote middle of the night kinds of things to deal with them. But once I came, and it was Marianne Moorfield who helped me find the Poetry Center, and that at that time there were 9 poets who came during the week, and I went to almost every one of them at 8:30 in the morning until 10:30, and then went over to the lecture. And I learned so much about poetry. My mother had always read poetry as a child to me, but and I continued an interest in poetry, but boy, it was the craft of poetry that I really didn't know about, and that really helped. So does that answer?
I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I just read this essay, and the author was bemoaning the new poetry, which seemed to depend on clever ideas and consciousness and the importance of the idea, and he was bemoaning the absence of music and how hard it was to memorize new poetry. It was easy for him to memorize Yeats or Emily Dickinson, or the music of the poetry helped. And so I wonder how important the music of the words is.
It's extremely important.
Could you just rephrase the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is music important to me in my poetry? Because some of the modern poets don't seem to recognize that as an element. I don't know about modern poets, but I will tell you that I started out as a musician, and I taught music and taught piano, and the whole life was filled with music. And so I'm very, very conscious of the music, of the rhyme, of the rhythm, of the cadence, of all the music, the tonality, the intonation. I mean, it's really very important. So, yes.
And the other half of a different question entirely is, how did your poetry find its way into being a published book? Do publishers seek you, or do you seek publishers?
No, publishers do not seek poets. Basically, I mean, there are a few that are strictly poetry publishers, but a friend of mine who was here at Chautauqua, actually, was from Seattle, and she knew of this small publisher called Coffee Town Press. And she said, well, you know, I know the editor, why don't you just write, see if they would take one of your manuscripts. And I did, and they did all 4 of my books. Now, this one, the sign language, was the product of a competition. And every year there's a bunch, there are competitions. This is a chapbook. If you know what a chapbook is, a small, a short poetry book. There's about 28 poems in it, as opposed to 50. So they were looking for chapbooks. And I did not win the first prize, but I was a semifinalist. And they offered me an opportunity to be published.
Thanks.
So, thank you.
Laura, is it any different for prose writers and memoirists? Do publishers come? Or is it unringing phones? Okay.
It is unringing phones. Some people get lucky. Some people have a piece in New York Times Modern Love or The Atlantic, or something will go viral and will get contacted. But for most of us, it's submitting, and contests are a good way.
Right.
And if you're lucky and they like you, they'll do another book or 4.
And a lot of rejection.
Yes, a lot of rejection. For sure. Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to drive the mic. I just wanted to say that I'm always grateful to this particular porch. I started writing when I was pregnant with my second child. I just suddenly started writing and couldn't stop. And my mother sent me here to take my very first writing workshop.
Oh,
and I did years of writing workshops here, and my heart will always belong to the literary sector.
That was an unpaid testimonial. Thank you so much, Laura. Just to bounce back to 2 things that were brought up, and some announcements, and I'll give you a while. But one is, if you go, Duotrope is a website that lists lots of things, including agents, and you'll see FFFFF meaning fiction, FFFFFF. I've seen 1 P in 3 or 4 years for an agent who handles poetry, and that was for an agent that was closing to submission, that didn't want it anymore. So that's it. And with the music, I always think of the quote from the Irish poet John O'Donoghue, said that music is what language would be if it could. And poetry, I think, especially the kind you write, as opposed to cryptic, clever idea of poetry, comes very close to music, something that's sang. That's great. Plus the other thing, accessibility. You could understand that poetry. It came from an emotional place you could identify, right? As a I always think of my college roommate who, under the influence, said, "Oh, I have these great thoughts." But at one time, after having a little weed, he wrote down his great thought, and he came up with the phrase, "scintillated by the aftervenom of a cobra," which is kind of an intriguing phrase, but I do not know what the heck it means. Okay. Some modern poetry. Literary events this week, and I know some of you have to go on. Tomorrow on the porch, the Young Readers Program will deal with Naomi Shihab-Nye's Grace Notes, poems about family. At 3:30 in the Hall of Philosophy, Naomi will appear talking about her book of poetry, aimed more at adults to tiny journalists. And he, Ethelbert Miller, will discuss his book, The Little Book of Eve, which is a book of haikus. 12:15, actually in the ballroom, it's usually on the steps or on the porch, but somewhere on the steps, will present what is called the Unbounded. I think they're looking at a interview with authors that was done virtually. And some readers from this week's workshops will read, spotlight readers. do want to remind you that The Witnesses, that was a play developed at Chautauqua, is having its world premiere. And also there's a new script, What's Best for Baby, a little bit about the baby powder scandal, is this weekend. Now, please think about joining us next week, or sadly, our final Authors Hour of the season. Catherine D'Agostino will be reading her mystery from her mystery Braided Lies, a Thousand Islands Castle mystery. Thousand Islands is not about poisonous dressing, it's about a location. Okay, David Walsh will be reading, yes, David Walsh will be reading from his book of poetry, Touchstones and Thread. Please consider officially joining the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. Little secret, if you join now, your membership will be good next year as well, so you get more months for your money. And as I mentioned before, check out our YouTube channel for this reading if you want to relive it or you want to share it with someone else. And all our readings and events that were Zoomed are also on YouTube now since 2020. Thank you so much. Take care. Final books.
All right, which book do you want me to?